This is my true story. My son locked me in his garage for 5 months, all because I asked for extra food one night. I was standing in the kitchen, quietly holding my plate, and I said, "Could I please have a little more?" He didn't even answer. He just walked over, pushed me back, and slammed the garage door shut. I heard the bolt click. I thought it was a mistake. I waited. Then I screamed. But no one came. There was one flickering bulb, a cold floor, the smell of wet cardboard and spiders nesting in the corners. That night, while I sat barefoot in the dark, he was upstairs, laughing with his friends, drinking wine with his wife, blasting music loud enough to drown my voice. I stopped knocking. I stopped asking. I started planning. Because what he didn't know was that while I was rotting in the shadows, I was preparing his ending. You won't believe what I did to him. Before I tell you, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. This wasn't how I imagined my old age. When I held my son for the first time, he was only 6 pounds, bundled in a yellow hospital blanket, blinking up at me with eyes too big for his face. I remember thinking I'd never let the world hurt him. I gave up my career in nursing to be a full-time mother. I told everyone it was temporary, but deep down I knew. I didn't want to miss a single second of his childhood. I ironed his uniforms. I packed his lunches with handwritten notes, little drawings when he was too young to read. When he got sick in the 4th grade and threw up in front of his class, I left work without clocking out and arrived at school with 2 spare shirts and a thermos of warm soup. I remember how small his hand felt in mine on the walk back to the car. I remember him squeezing it tighter when he saw kids laughing at him. I was his safe place. That's what I built my identity around, being the one person in the world who would always come when he called. As he grew older, the calls came less. First, it was just missed text messages, then silence for days. I told myself he was busy. He had a life, a girlfriend, a job. But even after he got married and moved back into my house with his new wife, I barely existed in that picture. I cooked for them, cleaned around them, made space for their marriage. I paid the taxes on the house and covered the full $2,300 mortgage each month so they could save. I gave them the master bedroom. I moved into the smaller guest room. I pretended I didn't hear when his wife called me a burden on the phone to her mother. I pretended I didn't notice when they hosted dinner parties and never invited me to the table. They said I had old-fashioned views, that my presence made their guests uncomfortable. I stayed silent. I took walks around the block. I washed dishes in the sink until the running water drowned out the sound of their laughter. But silence has a texture. It presses against your ribs after a while. And soon, even the smallest gestures, the ones you cling to, begin to vanish. Like when he stopped saying thank you for the groceries I brought in, or when I left him a birthday gift on the kitchen table and it sat there for days, unopened. I thought maybe he forgot, but then I found it later in the trash, still wrapped. No card, no note, no acknowledgement, just gone. That was the first time I cried in a long time. Not loud, just quietly, into my pillow, facing the wall. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive, that I was imagining the coldness. So I started documenting it. Not because I planned to do anything, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't going mad. I made notes on my phone, dates, times, little phrases I overheard, moments I was excluded, moments I was erased. There were so many. Like when I made dinner for everyone and they told me afterward they'd already eaten out. Like when they posted pictures of a family weekend getaway, a cabin I'd paid for, and cropped me out of every frame. I was there. I took the photo, but you'd never know it. They said I was always tired, that I didn't understand their modern lifestyle. But I think deep down, they wanted me invisible. They just didn't have the guts to say it. Until the night I asked for more food. It was a regular Wednesday. I'd been cleaning out the gutters earlier that day. My back hurt. My knees were sore. I'd skipped lunch and hoped dinner would be warm and filling. But when I asked if there was more, just a second helping, nothing extravagant, he looked at me with a face I didn't recognize. And then everything went black. Not because I passed out, because he turned off the lights and locked the door behind me. And I found myself standing in the garage. No coat, no explanation, just me and a single hanging bulb that flickered like it was mocking me. I thought it was a mistake, that maybe he was angry or needed a moment. But the minutes turned to hours, and when I knocked, no one came. That first night, I slept sitting up on a box of winter coats. The air was cold. The concrete was hard. I was too stunned to cry. I kept thinking, this has to be a misunderstanding. But when morning came, nothing changed. No breakfast, no apology, just footsteps upstairs, laughter, music, glasses clinking. They were having a party, while I rotted in the dark. And that was when I realized they weren't ashamed of what they were doing. They were celebrating it. I was out of sight, out of mind, and they liked it that way. But what they didn't know was that this was still my house. Every wall, every pipe, every shingle on the roof was in my name. I paid for it. I protected it. I built a life in it. And they were just tenants, treating me like a ghost. But ghosts remember. Ghosts wait. Ghosts know where the deeds are hidden. Ghosts don't need to shout. They just plan. And I was about to make sure they felt every inch of what they'd done. Quietly. Thoroughly. Perfectly. You won't believe what happened next. I had given up so much for him over the years, but it wasn't just the big things people talk about. It wasn't just the house or the bills or the way I restructured my retirement fund to make sure he and his wife could live comfortably without dipping into their own savings. It was the little humiliations I swallowed every single day, like when I offered to cook and they told me the smell of my food gave their friends a headache, or when I suggested helping with laundry and his wife smiled and said, "That's cute, but we don't do things your way anymore." I paid $2,300 a month for 5 years straight to keep that roof over their heads. That's $138,000, not counting groceries, repairs, furniture, and utility bills that were always in my name. But I didn't just hand them money. I handed them peace. I made it possible for them to live the lifestyle they flaunted. And in return, I was erased. Slowly. Deliberately. I overheard one of their parties once. They didn't know I was near the stairwell. One of the guests said, "I thought your mother-in-law lived with you." And his wife laughed. "She does. Somewhere." There was a pause. Then my son said, "She's harmless. Just old furniture in the corner." They all laughed. I remember clutching the railing so hard that I left crescent marks in my palm. That's what I had become to him. Furniture. Not a woman. Not a mother. Not the person who raised him through nights of fever and panic and debt. Just something to decorate the background of his new life. And yet, I still set out their vitamins. I still folded their towels. I still kept the house clean. Because I didn't know how to stop being a mother, even to someone who treated me like I was already dead. But the night he locked me in that garage, something cracked. Not loudly. Just a hairline fracture, clean and silent. I looked around at the unfinished walls, the exposed beams, the spider that built a web near the light. And I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was a message. He wanted me gone. That could be arranged, but not the way he expected. I started thinking, slowly, methodically. I retraced every payment, every document I had ever signed. I remembered that I never removed my name from the deed, that the mortgage, still active, came from my account, that even the water bill, the trash service, the gas and electric, all in my name, all paid by me. I was the bones of that house. And bones don't forget. Bones don't beg. They hold weight. And mine were ready to shift. So I waited. 5 months. No one came looking. No one called. They told people I had moved into a nursing home, that I was adjusting to a new routine. Meanwhile, I was surviving on canned soup and rationed crackers they left in the garage once a week, like I was a stray cat. I heard them laughing over movies upstairs while I counted spiders and stared at a single screw sticking out of the drywall. But each night, as I lay awake on the cold concrete, I planned. Not revenge, correction, precision. Because if they thought they'd locked me away, they had no idea what doors they'd actually opened. Something inside me shifted the moment I realized they weren't checking in anymore, not even out of guilt or convenience. The silence became their answer. And in that silence, I found clarity. My son had counted on my patience, but not my precision. He assumed I was too old, too tired, too broken to keep records. He thought locking me in a room would erase everything I knew about the house, the money, the name on the papers. But I remembered it all. I remembered signing the refinance agreement in 2011, the same year I cashed in my retirement early to keep the house out of foreclosure. I remembered the insurance company addressed everything to me. I remembered the lawyer I used to set up the original deed, and that I had never signed over my half. Not once. And while they celebrated birthdays and anniversaries upstairs, I started counting backwards, line by line, bill by bill. I replayed every statement I'd ever paid. $3,100 for the HVAC repair, $8,700 when their car broke down and I offered to cover it, $4,200 every single month for 3 straight years while they were both figuring things out with their startup. I paid for their life, and they locked me away when I asked for a little more soup. That detail always stuck with me. It wasn't even money I asked for, just soup. And still, he locked the door, like I was a dog who needed boundaries. But the truth was, I was the architect of that home, not the drywall or the decor. I was the one who kept it upright, and I knew how to make it fall, slowly, cleanly, and with documents, not drama. So when they forgot about me entirely, I began memorizing dates. I reviewed everything I'd ever mailed in. I remembered the last time the county tax notice came. I knew where the folders were kept in the hallway cabinet. I began whispering names to myself at night. The escrow officer, the county assessor, the financial advisor they never bothered to speak to directly. I remembered every single one. I may have been trapped in their garage, but my mind walked freely. And in that mental freedom, I began laying bricks, not out of anger, out of design. Because if he had wanted to erase me, I was going to give him exactly that, but legally, financially, and permanently, piece by piece, quietly, carefully, and by the time he noticed, it would already be done. Every day that passed inside that garage made my vision sharper. I wasn't pacing, I wasn't crying, I was organizing. I remembered where the fireproof lockbox was kept, inside the linen closet, behind the old towels no one used. I remembered the code. I'd written it into my recipe book under the banana bread section. 1442, the year my grandmother was born. Inside that box were the house documents, the deed, still bearing my name, the will, still unsigned and unfiled, and my power of attorney papers, tucked neatly under the folder labeled Health. He never knew I kept the originals, because while he partied upstairs and told everyone he was the sole provider, I was the one who refinanced that home. My name was still first on the mortgage, and legally I could sell it without his consent, if I had the right steps in order. That's what I began building, from memory. I made lists in my head. Escrow company, Jensen and Blake. Real estate lawyer, Miriam Cole. Bank officer, Thomas Patel. I began reciting their names like prayers. Then I started reconstructing the numbers. $4,800, the amount I transferred to cover their last property tax delinquency. $143,600, what I'd paid in mortgage over 7 years. $2,120, the emergency loan I took out in my name for their wedding venue deposit. Every dollar was another string I could cut. Every figure gave me more leverage. And while I didn't have access to my phone or my purse, I had time. And time, in the hands of someone with a long memory, is the most dangerous tool of all. I replayed the last call I'd made before being locked in. It was to the insurance company, asking for a policy update. I remembered the name of the agent, Michelle. I remembered the question she asked. Do you still want to be the primary beneficiary? I had said yes. And that meant I still was. Every time they forgot to include me, I grew stronger. Every time they laughed upstairs, I wrote another line in my head. I even counted the steps he took across the floor above me. The exact time the shower turned on. The way the lights flickered through the garage vent when they had friends over. I was studying their rhythm, because I needed to time my escape. And once that door opened again, whether by mistake or neglect, I was going to walk out with more than my freedom. I was going to walk out with everything. I began to trace the calendar in my mind, day by day, counting not by light or clocks, but by the rhythm of his footsteps, the rotation of his girlfriend's car pulling in and out of the driveway, and the sound of deliveries being left at the front door. I learned their schedule like a surgeon studies the body. I knew when the trash was taken out. I knew when he overslept. I knew when she left the front door open for too long because the hallway echoed differently. I even recognized the scent of her shampoo when it floated through the vent after a shower. and with every familiar cue, I stitched together a pattern, one I could use. Because I knew that garage wasn't locked forever. One day, 1 hour, one careless second, they would forget to bolt it. And that would be enough. But I also knew something else. I didn't need to break out. I needed to be let out. Why? Because if I forced my way through, the narrative would shift. They'd cry wolf. They'd say I was losing it, that I'd escaped, that I was unstable. But if they opened the door, if they let me walk out, then everything I planned could happen without suspicion. So I waited. I stayed quiet. I stopped knocking. I stopped crying. I became the ghost in the garage, unmoving, unbothered, and slowly they forgot I was even there. That was the first victory, because with their guard down, I could begin the real phase. The moment the door opened, 3 inches, on a Tuesday morning when the girlfriend came to get old boxes, I said nothing. I let the light pour in. I let the spider crawl across my hand. I waited until I heard her walk back inside. Then, carefully, I slipped a crumpled note through the crack. It was addressed to Miriam Cole, my lawyer, with one instruction: call the office, use my maiden name. I'd written it in the dark, using eyeliner I'd stashed years ago in my coat pocket. And the moment that note reached her, through a neighbor's mailbox, through a series of forgotten favors and people who still remembered me, the wheels began turning. The property title was pulled, the ownership confirmed, the sale initiated quietly. I wasn't waiting for them to apologize. I wasn't hoping for rescue. I was authoring their fall from inside their own home. And they never heard it coming. The day I stopped hoping was the day I won. Not because it felt good, it didn't, but because it cleared the fog from my eyes. Up until then, some part of me still wanted to believe he was my son. Not just biologically, but emotionally. That the little boy who used to fall asleep on my chest was still there, buried under arrogance or shame or pressure. But that morning, I think it was morning, the sun felt different behind the garage wall. I heard him laughing upstairs about something the girlfriend said, and in that laugh, something snapped. Not in a violent way, not in a tearful way. Just gone. My heart stopped reaching for him. My memories stopped defending him. My pain stopped negotiating with the past. I realized I'd raised a stranger who used my love like a doormat, who took my years of sacrifice and turned them into jokes shared over wine with friends who didn't know, or didn't care, that I was rotting 2 floors below. And so I stopped praying for him. I started praying for myself, for clarity, for strength, for precision. The kind of prayer that doesn't beg or plead, the kind of prayer that moves mountains without sound. That was the shift. I no longer wanted to escape. I wanted to dismantle, silently, piece by piece, the house of cards they thought they owned. Not because I hated him, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop waiting for him to care. And with that silence came a strange calm, the kind of calm that builds before a storm you've already planned. The plan didn't come to me all at once. It unraveled slowly, like thread pulled from a fraying sleeve. One quiet hour at a time, one invisible calculation after another. I didn't have paper, I didn't have a phone, I didn't even have a clock, but I had my memory, and I had time. So I started with the basics, the deed. He thought the house was his because he lived upstairs, because he held the remote, because he slammed doors like a king. But I had never transferred the title. My name was still on everything: the mortgage, the utilities, the homeowner's insurance. Every bill he bragged about paying, it was auto-drafted from the checking account I opened the year his father died, the same one I used to deposit my pension into every month. He didn't even realize he was a tenant in a castle he didn't own. That garage, that prison, I paid for its insulation. I paid for the drywall that now boxed me in. And if he wanted to treat me like a prisoner, he'd made one fatal mistake. He locked the warden inside the building she built, and I knew every exit. The first sign of his carelessness came during one of his drunken nights upstairs. I heard the garage door rattle, just once. He didn't check the latch properly. I waited a day, then another, testing it quietly, inch by inch, until finally, with one careful pull, it gave. Not wide enough to crawl out yet, but enough to let light in. and with light came everything I needed. A sliver of signal on the old garage Wi-Fi. Weak, unstable, but present. That night, I used a broken tile to unscrew the baseboard near the far wall, where I'd once stored a fireproof lockbox. I prayed it was still there. And it was. Inside was the second key. Not to the house, but to my laptop. The old one. The one I'd hidden behind a broken toolbox years ago when he first moved back in. He never found it. Never cared enough to search. That night, I pulled it out like an old weapon. Dusty, but not dead. It took 15 minutes to boot. Then I was back in. Back to the emails. Back to the mortgage portal. Back to the legal files I'd kept scanned in a private folder labeled recipes. Everything he thought was his wasn't. Everything he assumed I'd forgotten, I hadn't. I downloaded the title documents, the trust papers, the living will. I checked my accounts. 4 of them. Still active. Still in my name. The utilities, the property taxes, the emergency line of credit. He hadn't changed a thing. He hadn't even bothered. For 5 months, he'd assumed my silence meant submission, that I'd grown too weak, too tired, too old to fight back. But what he didn't realize is that silence sharpens you. It clarifies the lies. It files down the distractions. It gives you space to see the structure clearly and then dismantle it piece by piece. I started small. I canceled the credit cards tied to the house. Quietly, digitally, one by one. The Netflix, the internet, the auto payments to the grocery service, all gone. The second week, I called the insurance company and removed him from the policy. The third, I emailed the mortgage holder and inquired about a short sale. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted options. The house had gained $143,000 in value since I'd purchased it. The market was strong, the equity was clean, and I had power, legal, digital, and silent. The final step came on a Tuesday afternoon. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I opened the garage just enough to slide out, still in my nightgown, still weak from hunger. I walked 2 blocks barefoot to the neighbor's house. I didn't explain. I just asked to borrow their landline, and from there, I called my lawyer. Not a new one. The same man who handled my husband's estate 19 years earlier. He picked up in 2 rings. "It's time," I said. "You still have the papers?" He did. "List the house," I told him. "As is. No notice. Make it cash only, no contingencies." Within 48 hours, a buyer was in place. A quiet man from Arizona with no intention of living in it. Just wanted the land. Offered full price. No inspection. I signed everything from the garage using DocuSign and an old fingerprint scanner I'd hidden inside my sewing kit. By the end of the week, the sale was pending. Title transfer in motion. Funds wired to a trust in my name. And the eviction notice? It was served on a Sunday morning, slid under the front door while he was still hungover. He didn't understand it at first. Laughed, probably. Thought it was a prank. Until the sheriff showed up 2 days later with the final papers. "You don't own this house," they told him. "Your mother does. Or did. It's already sold." He tried to argue. Screamed, I'm sure. But paperwork doesn't lie. Ownership doesn't care about volume. While he was upstairs watching sports and drinking beer with the woman who called me a burden, I was downstairs transferring every inch of his foundation out from under his feet. And when they finally came to clear him out, I didn't even watch. I just listened, from the same garage he'd once used to lock me away. The same space I now stood in as the true owner of his fate. No yelling, no revenge speech. Just a simple email from the escrow company. Transaction complete. I didn't respond. I just closed the laptop. I walked upstairs one final time, not as a mother begging for love, but as a woman reclaiming her silence. And when I stepped into the living room, it was empty. No laughter, no music, just dust where their arrogance used to live. And for the first time in 5 months, I breathed. Not because I was free, but because I had chosen it. By the time the ink had dried, I was already gone. Not in body, not yet, but in spirit. I'd made peace with the woman I used to be and buried her quietly beneath the floorboards of that garage. The one who begged for warmth, who cried into her sleeves, who whispered forgiveness into walls that never answered. She no longer lived in me. What remained was still, deliberate, unshakable. The kind of stillness you find in courtrooms before a verdict. I left the keys on the kitchen counter, not because I had to, but because I knew he'd search for a reason why. I wanted him to find nothing but silence. No letter, no warning, no goodbye. Just the cold brass of keys that no longer opened anything he could claim. The day he returned, late, drunk, loud, he didn't even notice at first. Not the missing couch, not the echo in the hallway, not the framed deed that used to hang by the stairs, now gone. But he noticed the lock. It clicked differently. He tried twice, then again, then louder. And then finally, the fear crept in. The kind of fear that turns even arrogance into confusion. I stood across the street, watching from behind tinted glass, parked just far enough to be invisible but close enough to witness the unraveling. He pounded. He cursed. He rattled the knob like a man trying to force the world back into his grip. But nothing opened. Nothing responded. He called my name. Not once, not kindly. He screamed it like it owed him something. And I didn't flinch. I just sat there, breathing, remembering every time I had whispered his name through the garage door with no answer. I watched him pace, panic, pull out his phone, dialing numbers that couldn't fix what I'd undone. The realtor had followed my timeline precisely. The closing happened 3 days prior. The funds, every cent I'd invested, every payment I'd made, every sacrifice I'd swallowed, were already safe in a separate account, under a name he couldn't touch. He wouldn't even find out until the papers hit his inbox. Not that he checked his email unless it was about a party or a refund. I watched his girlfriend come out next. She looked around, confused, holding a wine glass, still dressed like the world was hers to command. But when she saw the empty driveway, the blank space where the family car used to be, and no trace of me anywhere, her posture shifted. The confidence wilted. I saw her mouth something I couldn't hear. Maybe his name, maybe mine. It didn't matter. They were locked out of a life I had paid for and finally reclaimed. I didn't call the police. I didn't threaten them. I didn't need to. That's the beauty of quiet power. It doesn't roar, it removes. And as they stood there, disconnected from comfort, from certainty, from entitlement, I drove away, not fast, not triumphant, just finished. I didn't leave behind a trace. No forwarding address. No explanation. Because I'd already explained myself for decades. In meals, in money, in mothering, they never appreciated. I went somewhere quieter, rented a small cabin, tucked against a hill, where the light doesn't flicker and the air doesn't taste like regret. And I sat. I sat with the weight of everything. The betrayal, the silence, the months in that garage. And let it pass through me like wind through broken shutters. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just breathed. And every time I heard a bird outside instead of boots above my head, I felt my chest loosen. Every night I slept without a lock clicking behind me was another thread of myself stitched back together. He tried to reach out, of course. Dozens of calls from unfamiliar numbers. Messages filled with question marks, blame, confusion. At first, he sent voice notes, trying to sound calm, trying to pretend he cared. Then came the anger, the threats, the accusations, the cheap reversals of guilt. You abandoned us. You'll regret this. I was just trying to help you. I didn't respond, not once, because I'd already done everything he never did for me. I listened, I endured, I stayed. And when I finally left, it was not for revenge. It was for survival, for clarity, for peace. The hardest part wasn't taking back what was mine. It was accepting that love doesn't always grow back where it was planted. Sometimes it dies, quietly, slowly, in the dark. And no matter how many years you water it, beg it, kneel beside it, it never blooms again. So I planted something new. Not love for him, but love for the woman I used to be, the one who waited too long to be free. I bought myself a new chair, a blue one, soft, wide enough to curl up in with a book. And every morning, I sit there with tea and let the sun touch my face like it used to when I was young. Sometimes I remember the sound of the garage lock, the scratch of spiders, the echo of laughter upstairs that never included me. But it doesn't hurt like it used to. It just reminds me how far I've come. He thought he could trap me, starve me, break me. But all he did was teach me how much strength silence holds. He'll never understand the version of me that walked away, because he never met her. She was born the moment he locked that door, and she's not coming back. Not for him, not for apologies, not for memory's sake. I don't check his updates. I don't follow his life. I don't wonder what the girlfriend did next, or where they sleep now, or if they even remember my birthday, because I remember every moment they forgot mine. And now I forget them, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Some people cut you open and expect you to heal around their mess. I chose to close, to seal, to never reopen that wound again. I told myself one thing, and I kept my promise. I said I'd get out without screaming, and I did. I said I'd leave without burning the house down, and I did. I said I'd win, not loudly, not cruelly, but permanently, and I did. He lost a house, but I gained myself, and I will never trade that back again. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or thunder. It just settles. Like dust after a storm, it lands on your shoulders quietly and reminds you what it feels like to simply exist without fear. That's what I have now. Not happiness, not revenge, not even closure in the way people describe it on television. Just peace. I make my tea the way I like it. I fold my blanket how I prefer. I eat when I'm hungry and sleep when I'm tired. There's no voice barking my name, no footsteps banging upstairs, no locked door waiting to trap me when the lights go out. Just me, just the wind, and the quiet tap of rain on my roof some nights that sounds more like comfort than anything I've heard in years. I didn't win because I sold the house. I didn't win because he cried, or begged, or realized anything. Truth is, he might never understand what he did. Not really. People like him rarely do. They rewrite the story in their favor until they believe it. In his version, I was the difficult one, the burden, the old woman who didn't know how to be grateful. But I don't live in that story anymore. I don't correct it. I don't argue. I let him narrate whatever version lets him sleep at night, because I sleep just fine. What I did wasn't out of cruelty. It was survival. If I hadn't left, I would have died in that garage. Not physically, maybe. But the parts of me that still hoped, still dreamed, still believed I was worthy, they were suffocating one day at a time. And now, they breathe again. I find joy in the smallest things. The way the sun rises through my curtains. The way warm socks feel on cold mornings. The way the mailman smiles at me even if he doesn't know my name. These are the things I fought for. Not revenge, not punishment. Just small pieces of life that no one can take from me again. I've thought a lot about motherhood, how it asks so much of you, and how sometimes it never gives back. I used to believe that love was enough. That if you poured it in, if you stayed, if you gave everything, it would return to you. But love without respect is just servitude. And I'm not a servant anymore. I was a mother, a provider, a woman who carried more than she should have. And I still am. But now, I carry only what's mine. My past is heavy, but I've placed it down gently. My heart is scarred, but it beats steady. My voice, once quieted in garages and kitchens and living rooms where no one listened, now echoes in my own space, without apology. If you've ever loved someone who used that love against you, then you know. You know the ache. You know the shame. You know the silence that becomes a second skin. And maybe you're still in that place, still waiting for the lock to click, still hoping they'll change. I won't tell you what to do, but I'll tell you this. No one is coming to save you. Sometimes the only person who can rescue you is you. It might be quiet, it might be slow, it might take months of planning and years of courage. But when the moment comes, take it. Leave. Walk away. Start again. And if you do, don't look back. Let them wonder where you went. Let them curse the silence. Let them write their stories and frame themselves as victims. You know the truth? You lived it. And that's enough. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not broken. I'm not even sad. I'm just free. And that is more than I ever dreamed I'd be. So if you're still watching this, still listening, still wondering what happened after I walked away, here's your answer. I lived. Finally, fully, quietly, I lived. And I hope you do too. What would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths.